Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Ted Flint. With us today, Assemblyman Steve McLaughlin, who serves the 107th Assembly District, which includes the counties of Rensselaer, Columbia, and Washington. Assemblyman McLaughlin, nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Let's start the discussion by talking about the governor's recent comments describing extreme conservatives. He wanted to know, who are they? Who are the extreme conservatives?
Well, it's his definition.
Yeah.
You know, it's what Andrew Cuomo decides is an extreme conservative. And then he went on a little tirade there and really pointed out mainstream positions held by millions of New Yorkers and hundreds of millions of Americans. He then defined them as extreme. And, you know, if you didn't hear it, you know, he said in that voice of his, he said, who are they? You know, are they these pro-life, as if that's an extreme position? That's a position held by at least 50% of Americans. Are they anti-gay? Are they pro-assault weapon? Well, it's such a convoluted way that he went about it. First of all, the pro-life position is the majority position, maybe not in New York State, but certainly in the United States. And even if it isn't the majority position, it's certainly worthy of respect, because there are those of us, myself and you and many others, I'm sure, that are pro-life. You prefer that baby to be born, of course, right? So that's not an extreme position. For this governor to say that was absolutely outrageous. That was the first thing. Then he says that if you support the traditional definition of marriage between a man and a woman, that you are somehow anti-gay. Well, just because you're pro-traditional marriage doesn't make you anti-gay any more than if you support gay marriage, it doesn't make you anti-heterosexual. So his logic, for a guy that went to law school, his logic is really lacking. And then he went on to say, are they pro-assault weapon? Well, those of us that are, first of all, what he banned with his Unsafe Act were not assault weapons. They were scary-looking guns. They were military-style firearms, but they were not assault weapons. So again, Andrew Cuomo likes to redefine words and people to suit his needs.
He didn't explain what an assault weapon is.
Didn't, because he can't.
Right.
You know, the assault weapon, that he calls them assault weapons. Well, we said many times, you know, if you strip the gun that he banned, if you take away all the add-ons to it, it's just a .22 basically. I mean, it's no different than any other gun. But if it doesn't have all the scary stuff, Andrew Cuomo's okay with it. Well, I mean, all that set aside, what he said was completely beneath the office of governor. And then he didn't have the integrity to apologize or back it down. He doubled down. Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York City, comes out and says, I agree with Andrew Cuomo, that there's no place in New York for those of us that hold those views. It was just beneath the office. It was undignified. And then to not have the integrity to apologize, really, you know, he's digging the hole even deeper. And I said the other day, he can dig a hole for himself quicker than a backhoe. He's just, you know, and then he, rather than apologize and say, you know what, I shouldn't have said that, you know, that was the wrong thing to say. He says, well, no, what I was saying was, or what I meant was, I was just talking about candidates. Well, first of all, those candidates represent the people that send them to office. So he's saying one and the same thing. So imagine, if you will, a chamber, which I'm sure he'd prefer, but it's not the way Thomas Jefferson and the rest of our founding fathers you know, thought this country should be. Imagine a chamber where everybody just voted in lockstep with Andrew Cuomo, where everybody just raised their hand and said, yes, yes, dear leader, yes. Well, we do have countries like that. North Korea, the Soviet, Russia. We have countries like that, but they're not the United States of America. So the governor should have had the integrity to apologize. You know, it angered me, but it angered millions of Americans. So if he's going to do things like this, again, he continues to shoot himself in the foot and destroy any chance he has of running for president, and he's damaging himself for re-election by the minute. So my advice to him is keep on going. As a Republican, just keep going. Keep doing what you're doing.
Let's talk about welfare fraud and people using EBT cards for purposes they should not be using them for, strip clubs and the like.
Yeah.
There's $120 million of federal funds at stake here if we don't correct the situation.
Yeah, this was a story that really broke a year ago, and I did some interviews on it then and talked about how outrageous it was to be, you know, people that we want to help, people that are on welfare and need help. It's supposed to be for essentials. It's supposed to be food, things like that. It is not supposed to be for liquor or lap dances or porn shops, but that's what's going on. And to the point where the federal government said to New York, you better get your act together, and if you don't take steps to stop this, you're going to lose $120 million annually in federal funds. Well, that's $120 million that we then don't have to help that single mom, to help that elderly person, to help the person that's needs the help, the people you really want to help. So what happened? The Senate passed a bill to prevent it. The Assembly, and I co-sponsored the bill in the Assembly. Sheldon Silver didn't bring the bill to the floor. So the Assembly never passed it. The deadline was this past, as we're filming this, it was about 5 days ago. It was a Saturday. Well, that Saturday came and went, and we didn't get a word from the Cuomo administration. Now this is, as I've said, this is a governor that will take credit for the opening of an envelope. So for him to not take credit for stopping $120 million from leaving or from forfeiting to the feds, this is a governor that would brag about that. Quite frankly, any governor would. If you stopped $120 million you stopped it from leaving the state, basically. You prevented it. You would say, look what I did. We're going to get that $120 million. Well, we didn't get a word from the Cuomo administration. 48 hours later, after myself and some of the other assemblymen like Jim Tedisco, Assembly Leader Brian Cole, we were kind of banging the drum saying, what's going on? Did you comply or not? 48 hours later, we get a very short press release from the Cuomo administration saying basically we complied. So Jim Tedisco and I took a news crew and went down to the Office of Temporary Disability Assistance yesterday down on North Pearl Street, walked in the door, tried to talk to the commissioner. They're on the 5th floor. Now, this is 2 state assemblymen that can't get through security. And we have state IDs. So they said, well, they're going to come down and talk to you. Well, I'm sure what was happening is they were calling the 2nd floor to the executive chambers to find out what to do from Andrew Cuomo. So a half an hour later, finally somebody comes down. And we asked very specific question, when did New York State submit the paperwork to the federal government? And the answer was, we met the deadline. But that wasn't what I asked. I asked, when did you submit it? Well, after a few back and forth questions, they said, well, we submitted it on Friday. Well, the deadline was Saturday. We think they submitted it Friday, but there's no proof at this point. So I said, well, I want the time-stamped document, because you had to email it. There's no way you got it there on time if you're telling me you sent it Friday. It had to be done electronically. I asked for a time-stamped document. I still don't have it 24 hours later. They send me stuff that doesn't prove at all when they sent it. So the questions remain. Did they really comply, or are they saying they complied? And if they complied, let's assume that they did, because they didn't want to lose the $120 million. Why did this governor allow welfare fraud to continue unchecked until the absolute possible second? The last possible moment, Andrew Cuomo acted. So the message to New Yorkers is that this governor was perfectly okay with welfare fraud until he absolutely had to act. Then he stepped in and submitted the paperwork, apparently. But again, we still don't have proof that it was submitted. But I'll take them at their word that they did submit it. The question again, why'd you wait until the last possible second to act? You could have done this a year ago and stopped this welfare abuse from happening.
And you could have done this without a bill passing the Assembly?
Well, that's apparently what's gone on, right? Because he has it in his budget, but we haven't passed that budget. So none of that is law at this point. So that wouldn't have met the deadline requirements. Now the Office of Temporary Disability says, well, we're going to do it administratively. Fine, but there are things that they cannot do administratively that have to be done legislatively. So there's this very muddied, convoluted mix going on where the people of New York and the legislature really doesn't know at this point, did they actually comply? Did they partway comply? What went on? And for 2 legislators to be kept waiting outside a state office building was a little bit rude and a little ridiculous that we don't have access to a building which we have oversight of as legislators.
So at this point, it's not clear whether the state will maintain or keep that $120 million?
They say they will. You have a Democratic administration in Washington with Barack Obama, so they're probably going to cover for this governor if he didn't, in fact, submit it. But again, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they submitted it. But by their own admission, they did it as the clock struck midnight, basically, and the clock was about to run out. Then apparently they reluctantly submitted a plan to the feds to stop $120 million, to stop from losing $120 million. So this welfare fraud, and that's what it is. It's theft of taxpayer money. And my question remains to this governor, why'd you allow it until you no longer could avoid it? That's when we get action from this governor, when there's $120 million at risk. Should have done it a year ago when it first came up.
Let's hit the New York State DREAM Act. This is another hot-button issue. It was debated a couple of hours on the floor yesterday, and it did pass the Assembly, as it does each year. Give me a brief synopsis of what's wrong with this.
Well, what's wrong with it is there are rules of any society. One of the most basic rules is that you're supposed to be a citizen of the country you're living in if you're going to be there legally. So the problem with the DREAM Act is it allows college aid, financial aid, to go to children of illegal aliens, illegal immigrants. They're not legal, they're illegal immigrants. The problem is, and the dilemma is, it is a dilemma because you don't want to hold anybody back. We're educating these kids K through 12 as we should. It's not really their fault if they were brought here. You could be brought here as a 5-day-old baby and you're not a citizen. But if your mom is pregnant and has you here in the States, of course, you are a citizen, right? So there's that dilemma. I get it. I get the dilemma. But at some point, there has to be a line in the sand, and you have to say the rules are the rules. We have borders. We have rules. So if the DREAM Act did pass the Assembly, I don't think it'll pass the Senate. Well, you never know. We'll see if it will. So it's really just another point of contention for the law-abiding legal citizen to say, you know, I'm playing by the rules. I'm doing the right thing. Yep. And yet you're going to give it to people that are here illegally. The other thing is, what do you say to those immigrants that stood in line and didn't break into the country, didn't sneak in here? They waited, and they went through the proper channels, and they played by the rules, and it might have taken them 3 or 4 years back in their home country. And that country might have been an oppressive dictatorship. But they waited, and they did the right thing, and they are now basically on the same level as those that are here illegally. So there's an issue of fairness here, is what it is.
In 90 seconds, I want to just touch on one aspect of the DREAM Act, the free college tuition to illegal immigrants. One argument from the other side yesterday said, look, undocumented immigrants pay taxes. They put money into the pool, too. They should be eligible for tax money. And how much money are we talking about? I heard $25,000. Is that the figure?
I'm not exactly sure of what the actual numbers will be. They're right when they say they pay taxes, but most of that is sales taxes. Not every illegal immigrant is filing a tax return for the United States. And that doesn't absolve them of the fact that they're here illegally. There has to be some standards in a society, and I think one of those standards should be you ought to be here legally. Now, do I want to exclude anyone? No. You should apply for citizenship. But in that DREAM Act, there's no impetus for them other than filing a very weak affidavit that they intend to someday become a citizen of the United States. If they were on a path to citizenship, or if the requirement was that if we're going to give this to you, you've got to become a citizen within X amount of years, because it does take a little while, then I might be more agreeable to looking at that. But the way that is structured, they even struck the good moral character clause. The federal DREAM Act says you have to be of good moral character to get this aid. The New York DREAM Act struck that right out. So they don't even say you have to be of good moral character. So could we at least have that in there? So just a bill that, that's problematic for a lot of people.
All right, if you want to get in touch with Assemblyman McLaughlin, you have a question, comment, you can do that by writing or calling his district office, and that number is right in front of you in Troy at 272-6149, 272-6149. It's Steve McLaughlin. Always a pleasure to see you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, keep up the good work. Thanks for joining us on this edition of Assembly Calendar. We will see you soon. I'm Ted Flint.